Well, well, well. Another black roach crawling into my block. Yo! Fresh meat!
4 men stood up. They knew the call. They boxed the quiet black man in before he took 2 steps.
Strip his tray. Let me see what we got.
One of them slapped it out of his hand. Food hit the concrete. Slade rolled up, 280 pounds.
Kneel, dog.
The quiet man stared right through him. Shoved Slade's chest with one hand.
Back up off me.
You got some nerve, boy. Ain't nobody told you? Fresh meat don't talk. You kneel, or I bury you right here.
Every guard looked away. 200 inmates held their breath. What happened in the next 30 seconds? That's exactly why Slade's own crew had to carry him out. His name was Caleb Quinn, 29 years old, 5'10", 165 pounds soaking wet. The kind of man you'd walk past on the street and never look at twice. But that was the mistake everybody made with Caleb. They saw quiet and assumed they were weak. They saw thin and assumed soft. They never bothered to look deeper. Caleb grew up on the east side of Baltimore. No father, no money, just him and his grandmother Ruth in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. Ruth worked double shifts at a hospital cafeteria 6 days a week. She raised Caleb with 2 rules: keep your head down and never throw the first punch. When Caleb was 14, a local gym owner named Big Phil saw him get jumped behind a corner store. 3 kids. Caleb didn't win, but he didn't go down either. Phil watched this skinny kid take hit after hit and keep getting back up. He walked over after and said 5 words. "Come train with me." That changed everything. Caleb had a gift. His reflexes were unnatural. His timing was surgical. By 22, he was tearing through the amateur MMA circuit. 3 states had his hands registered. Scouts were calling. A real career was right there in front of him. Then came the night that broke him. A sparring session. Caleb threw an elbow. Clean technique, nothing dirty, and his partner dropped. Jaw shattered in 2 places. The sound still lived in Caleb's head. Bone cracking. The scream that followed. The ambulance lights. His partner recovered. But Caleb didn't. He walked out of that gym and never went back. Told himself his hands were too dangerous. Told himself the next time could be worse. Ruth watched her grandson shrink into himself and said, "Your hands can heal or hurt, baby. You choose every single day." Caleb chose silence. He got a job at a warehouse, kept to himself. Life was small, but it was safe. Then one night, a routine traffic stop changed everything. A cop named Officer Briggs pulled Caleb over for a broken taillight. 20 minutes later, a bag of pills appeared in his glove compartment. Caleb had never touched drugs in his life. Didn't matter. His public defender met him for 11 minutes total. The judge gave him 3 years. Ridgemont State Correctional. Medium security. Overcrowded. Underfunded. The kind of place where ceiling tiles dripped brown water and the lights buzzed 24 hours a day. Cell Block D was the worst wing, and that was Donnie Slade's kingdom. Slade ran everything. Commissary, phone time, bed assignments, even which inmates got to sit where in the cafeteria. Every new arrival had 2 choices: pay Slade's weekly tax or get crushed. The guards knew. Some were scared. Most were paid off. The system worked. For Slade. But there was one guard who didn't play along. Officer Brenda Walsh. 15 years on the job. She'd filed complaint after complaint about Slade's operation. Every single one got buried. So Walsh started keeping a private notebook. Dates, names, incidents. She wrote everything down and told no one. Caleb's first night. Small cell. Concrete walls. He lay on a mattress thinner than a phone book and opened a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius. Down the row, someone was screaming. Caleb turned the page. In the next cell, an older black man named Terrence Moore leaned against the bars and watched. Terrence was 56, former paralegal, serving 5 years for a white-collar charge. He'd seen dozens of new inmates come through Block D. Most of them broke within a week. But this one was different. Terrence could feel it. The way Caleb absorbed that cafeteria beating and said nothing. The way he didn't shake, didn't cry, didn't pace. That wasn't a weakness. That was discipline. The next morning, Caleb woke up to a shadow standing in his cell doorway. Nathan Cole, Slade's right-hand man. Slade says you owe 50 a week, commissary or cash. First payment's due Friday. Caleb didn't even look up from his book. No. Nathan Cole stood there for a long second. He wasn't used to hearing that word. Nobody said no in Block D. He went straight back to Slade. The new fish said no, didn't even look at me. Slade was doing push-ups in his cell. He stopped mid-rep, slowly stood up, wiped his hands on his pants. He said what? No, just like that. Flat. Slade cracked his knuckles. A grin spread across his face, but his eyes weren't smiling. All right, I'll handle this one myself. The next day, the laundry room. Caleb was folding sheets alone. The door slammed behind him. He turned around and Slade was already 3 feet away. 2 of his guys blocked the exit. You think you're special? Slade said. Every tough guy that walks in here thinks the same thing. They all pay eventually. Caleb kept folding, didn't look up. I said I'm not paying. Slade grabbed him by the back of the neck and drove him face first into an open dryer. The metal edge caught Caleb's ribs. Something cracked. Pain shot through his side like electricity. Caleb's hands tightened into fists. His whole body tensed. Every reflex he'd trained for 8 years screamed at him to move, to counter, to finish it. He didn't. He pulled himself out of the dryer, straightened his shirt, and walked toward the door. Slade's guys stepped aside, not out of respect but confusion. They'd never seen anyone just take it and walk away. Slade called after him. That was free. Next time it will cost more. Back in his cell, Caleb sat on the edge of his bunk. His ribs throbbed with every breath. He pressed his palm against the spot where the dryer caught him and closed his eyes. Terrence appeared at the bars. Let me guess, laundry room? Caleb said nothing. He won't stop, Terrence said. You know that, right? Saying no made it personal. Now it's about his reputation. Caleb opened his eyes. I'm not fighting him. Terrence studied him for a long moment. You might not get that choice. That night, Slade made an announcement to the entire block. His voice echoed down the corridor like a verdict. The new fish has 48 hours. Double rate. He pays. Or I get creative. Slade didn't wait 48 hours. He started the next morning. Caleb came back to his cell after breakfast and found his books ripped apart. Pages of Marcus Aurelius scattered across the floor like dead leaves. His mattress was flipped. His one family photo, him and Ruth on his 16th birthday, was torn in half. He picked up the photo, held both pieces together, stared at it for a long time. He didn't say a word. Day 2. Caleb sat down in the cafeteria, took one bite of his food and tasted something wrong. Chemical. Burning. Someone had poured bleach into his tray. He spat it out and pushed the tray away. Slade's crew watched from across the room, elbowing each other, laughing. Terrence slid his own tray across the table. Eat mine. I'll figure something out. Caleb shook his head. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't eaten a full meal in 2 days. Day 3. Slade pulled strings with a guard on his payroll and got Caleb reassigned to sewage detail, the worst labor job in Ridgemont. 8 hours a day in a basement that smelled like death, knee-deep in waste, no gloves. The other inmates on that crew had all been there as punishment for fights. Caleb hadn't done anything. He showed up, did the work, said nothing. By the end of the first week, every inmate in Block D understood the message. Stay away from the new fish. Anyone who talked to Caleb, sat with Caleb, or even looked at Caleb too long would answer to Slade. It worked. The seats around Caleb emptied one by one. Men who had nodded at him in passing stopped making eye contact. A younger inmate named Davis, barely 20, had been friendly to Caleb on his second day. After Slade's warning, Davis walked past Caleb in the hallway without a word. The next Friday, Davis paid Slade's tax in full, hands shaking, eyes on the floor. That's what Slade did. He didn't just break one man, he made everyone else watch, so they'd break themselves. But Slade wasn't satisfied. Caleb's silence bothered him more than any fight would have. He told Nathan Cole one night in his cell, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. What's wrong with this guy? I take his food, take his books, put him in the sewer, and he just sits there, like I'm nothing. Cole shrugged. Maybe he's just built different. Nobody's built different. Everybody breaks. I just haven't found his button yet. Slade found it the next week. Caleb came back from sewage detail exhausted, and 3 guards were standing outside his cell. One of them held up a sharpened piece of metal, a shiv wrapped in tape. "Found this under your mattress, Quinn." Caleb looked at it. "That's not mine." "Save it for the review board." They cuffed him, dragged him down the corridor while Slade leaned against his cell door, arms crossed, watching with a smile that said everything. Solitary confinement, 5 days. The cell was 6 feet by 8 feet. No window, one light that never turned off, a concrete slab for a bed, a metal toilet with no seat. The air was thick and stale and tasted like rust. Day 1. Caleb sat on the slab and stared at the wall. His ribs still ached from the dryer. Day 2. The silence got heavy. No footsteps, no voices, just the buzz of the fluorescent light and the sound of his own breathing. Day 3. He started thinking about the sparring accident. The elbow, the crack, the scream. He could hear it all again in that tiny room. His hands started shaking. Day 4. He thought about Ruth, sitting in that apartment alone, waiting for letters he hadn't written because he didn't know what to say. How do you tell the woman who raised you that you're locked in a hole because someone planted a weapon you never touched? Day 5. Something shifted. He stopped shaking. He stopped replaying the accident. He sat up straight on that concrete slab and thought about what Terrence had told him through the bars. You might not get that choice. Caleb looked at his hands, opened them, closed them. He thought about Ruth's words, the ones he'd carried since he was 15. Your hands can heal or hurt, baby. You choose every single day. For 4 years, Caleb had chosen to hide, to keep those hands still, to pretend they were just hands. But sitting in that box, starving, bruised, framed for something he didn't do, he realized something. Choosing not to fight wasn't the same as choosing peace. Sometimes it was just choosing to let someone else win. When the solitary door opened on the 5th day, Caleb walked out. He was thinner, quieter, but anyone who looked closely would have noticed something different in his eyes. Terrence noticed right away. You okay? Caleb sat down on his bunk. I'm done letting him take it from me. Terrence leaned in. What does that mean? It means the next time he puts his hands on me, I'm going to finish it. Terrence studied Caleb's face. No anger, no heat, just a decision, solid as concrete. Then we need to be smart about it, Terrence said, because if you fight back without proof, they'll bury you in here forever. That night, every inmate in Block D heard Slade's voice boom down the hallway. Welcome back, fresh meat. I hope you rested up in there. Tomorrow morning, yard time. I got something real special planned for you. His crew laughed. The whole block heard it. But what Slade didn't know was that Caleb Quinn wasn't the same man who went into that box 5 days ago. And what happened in that yard the next morning would be watched by 40 million people. That night, Terrence came to Caleb's cell after lights out. He spoke low, almost a whisper. Listen to me. Slade's gonna come at you with numbers. 4, maybe 5 guys. He always does it in the yard because the cameras have blind spots. No footage means no proof. Your word against his. And guess who the warden believes? Caleb nodded. So what do we do? I know one guard who's clean. Walsh. She's been documenting Slade's operation for years. Nobody listens to her, but she's still watching. Terrence paused. If I can get word to her before yard time, she can reposition the camera on the east wall. One angle. That's all we need. And if she can't? Then you better make sure you're still standing when it's over. Because without footage, they'll charge you and add 10 years. Caleb sat in the dark for a long time after Terrence left. He didn't shadow box, didn't stretch. He just breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The same rhythm Big Phil taught him when he was 14. He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared. He was decided. At 6 a.m., the morning alarm hit. Steel doors rolled open down the corridor. Boots shuffled toward the yard. Terrence caught Caleb's eye from across the block and gave one small nod. Walsh was in position. Slade was already outside, waiting, 4 men behind him. The yard at Ridgemont was a flat rectangle of cracked concrete surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. One basketball hoop with no net, a pull-up bar rusted brown, and 200 inmates spread across the space like they were waiting for something. They were. Caleb walked out last, hands in his pockets, eyes forward. He could feel every stare in that yard land on him like a weight. The whole block knew what was coming. Inmates drifted toward the edges without being told, clearing the center like a ring forming itself. Slade stood in the middle, arms crossed. Nathan Cole on his left. 3 more guys fanned out behind him. 280 pounds of muscle and confidence. He rolled his shoulders and smiled. "Look who's back from the hole! You lose weight in there, fresh meat? You look like a skeleton somebody forgot to bury." Caleb stopped 15 feet away. He didn't respond. He just stood there, loose, balanced, feet shoulder-width apart, hands out of his pockets now, relaxed but ready. Terrence watched from the far wall. Walsh stood near the east entrance, clipboard in hand, her eyes on the camera she'd repositioned an hour ago. The red light was blinking, recording. Slade uncrossed his arms and started walking forward. Slow, heavy. Each step made his boots scrape against the concrete. "Last chance, dog. Kneel, kiss my hand, pay what you owe, and maybe I let you eat tonight." Caleb said one word. "No." Slade's grin vanished. "Get him." Cole moved first. He came from the left, fast for his size, and threw a wide right hook aimed at Caleb's temple. Caleb saw it before it started. He slipped left, let the fist sail past his ear, and drove a short right hand into Cole's liver. The sound was dull and wet, like dropping a phone book on a steak. Cole folded. His knees hit the concrete and he rolled onto his side, gasping, arms wrapped around his midsection. 1 down. 4 seconds. The second man came straight ahead, bigger than Cole. He charged with both hands out, trying to tackle Caleb to the ground. Caleb sidestepped, grabbed the back of the man's head, and used his own momentum to drive his face into the concrete. The man skidded 2 feet and didn't get up. 2 down. 7 seconds. The third and fourth came together, 1 from each side. Caleb backed up 2 steps, not panicking, just creating space. The one on his right swung first. Caleb blocked it with his forearm, pivoted, and delivered an elbow to the man's jaw. The crack echoed across the yard. The man's legs turned to water. The fourth one hesitated. That hesitation cost him everything. Caleb swept his lead leg out from under him, and the man hit the ground flat on his back. Air left his lungs in one loud grunt. He stayed down, staring at the sky. 4 down. 15 seconds. The yard was dead silent. 200 men stood frozen. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Slade was alone now. He looked at his 4 guys on the ground. Cole was still curled up, wheezing. The others weren't moving. Slade's jaw tightened. His fists balled up. "You think that scares me?" he said. But his voice had changed. The bass was gone. Something thin and tight had replaced it. He charged. All 280 pounds. Head down, arms wide, like a lineman going for a sack. The concrete shook under his boots. Caleb didn't move. Not yet. He waited. 1 second. 2. Then, at the last possible moment, he stepped offline to the left. Slade's momentum carried him forward into nothing. Caleb grabbed his right arm, pivoted his hip underneath Slade's center of gravity, and threw. The hip toss was a textbook. 280 pounds of Donnie Slade left the ground, rotated in the air, and hit the concrete back first. The impact sounded like someone dropped a refrigerator off a truck. Slade's eyes went wide. The air exploded out of his chest. He lay there, mouth open, trying to breathe. Caleb stood over him, not yelling, not celebrating. His breathing was barely elevated. He looked down at Slade and said it quiet enough that only the men closest could hear. "Stay down. It's over." Slade tried to get up. His body wouldn't cooperate. He pushed himself up on one elbow and collapsed again. A wheeze came out of his throat, high-pitched, broken. 22 seconds, start to finish. Nobody in that yard said a word. The only sound was Slade gasping on the concrete and the wind pushing through the chain-link fence. Then, from somewhere in the back, one man started clapping. Slow, deliberate. Then another. Then 10 more. Then the whole yard erupted. Men were shouting, grabbing each other's arms, slamming the fence. 2 years of fear cracked open in 30 seconds. Slade's crew picked him up. 2 men under each arm, dragging him across the yard like a broken mattress. His feet scraped the concrete, his head hung forward. The man who had run Block D for 2 years couldn't walk on his own. The guards finally moved in, after it was over. They put Caleb against the wall, hands behind his head. He didn't resist. Walsh watched from the east entrance. The camera's red light was still blinking. That footage, 41 seconds of grainy security camera video, was copied by a tech employee named Jordan, who worked the monitoring room. Jordan had watched Slade's crew beat inmates for months and reported it twice. Nothing happened. So when he saw what Caleb did, he made a copy on a thumb drive and uploaded it that night from his apartment. By morning, the video had 10,000 views. By noon, 100,000. By the next day, 4 million. The caption read, "Fresh Meat Fights Back." Hashtag Fresh Meat started trending on every platform. News outlets picked it up. Talk shows played the clip on loop. Internet commentators broke down Caleb's technique frame by frame. The liver shot, the elbow, the hip toss. Former fighters went on camera and said the same thing. That man has serious training. That was not a street fight. That was a professional dismantling a bully. Caleb Quinn became the most talked about inmate in America overnight. 4 million people watched a quiet man stand up in a concrete yard and refuse to kneel. But inside Ridgemont, the mood was very different. The warden sat in his office watching the same clip everyone else was watching, and his face was white. This footage exposed his prison, his guards, his failure. Someone had to pay for that, and the warden decided it wasn't going to be Slade. Warden Gerald Hodges had run Ridgemont for 11 years. In that time, he'd learned one rule above all others. Problems don't exist if nobody sees them. Slade's operation wasn't a secret. It was a system. Slade kept the inmates in line. The guards got kickbacks. Hodges got a quiet prison with low incident reports. Everybody won, except the inmates. Now 4 million people had seen what that system looked like from the inside, and the number was climbing every hour. Hodges called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. Doors closed, blinds shut. "Here's what happened," he told them. "An inmate with a violent history attacked 5 men in the yard unprovoked. That's the story. That's the only story." Within 24 hours, Caleb was charged with 5 counts of aggravated assault. The warden added a recommendation to extend his sentence by up to 10 years. Caleb was moved to a restricted wing, isolated from general population, no visitors, no phone calls. Then came Slade's statement. Hodges had coached him personally. Slade sat in the medical wing with a neck brace he didn't need and a bruise on his back that was real. A prison counselor recorded his statement on camera. "I was just standing in the yard minding my own business," Slade said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "Quinn came at me out of nowhere. No warning. He attacked me and my friends. We didn't do nothing." The video was released to local news as an official prison statement. The anchor played it side by side with the viral clip. The framing was clear. Dangerous black inmate attacks white prisoners without provocation. And it worked. The internet split in half overnight. Half the public saw a hero, a man who stood up to a bully. They shared the clip with captions like, "This is what courage looks like," and "Fresh meat is a whole meal." Hashtag fresh meat and hashtag justice for Caleb trended for 3 straight days. The other half saw a threat. Comment sections filled with words like thug and animal, and "this is why prisons exist." Cable news panels debated whether Caleb was a victim or a villain. One network ran a headline that read, "Violent inmate goes viral. Should we be celebrating this?" Caleb sat in his restricted cell and heard none of it. No TV, no radio, no mail. The warden had sealed him off from the world completely. But the world was already looking for him. 300 miles away in Washington, D.C., a civil rights attorney named Diane Prescott was eating dinner when her daughter showed her the clip on her phone. "Mom, you need to see this." Prescott watched it twice, then a third time. She set her fork down. "That man is trained," she said. "That's not aggression. That's self-defense from someone who waited until he had no other option." Prescott had spent 22 years fighting wrongful convictions and prison abuse cases. She knew what a setup looked like. and everything about the warden's narrative smelled wrong. 5 counts of aggravated assault against one man who was outnumbered 5-1, a victim statement from the biggest inmate in the block, no footage from the prison's own cameras. She made 3 phone calls that night. By morning, she had filed a motion to represent Caleb Quinn pro bono. The warden blocked her first visit request. Prescott filed a court order. The judge granted it within 48 hours. When she finally sat across from Caleb in a concrete visitation room, she studied him for a long moment. He was thinner than she expected. Calm. His hands rested flat on the table. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the first day," Caleb told her. "The cafeteria, the tax, the laundry room, the bleach, the sewage detail, the planted shiv, the solitary, and finally, the yard." Prescott took notes without interrupting. When he finished, she clicked her pen and looked up. "Here's what I need. The security footage from the east wall camera, the one that was repositioned. Your medical records from the laundry room incident. Slade's full disciplinary history, and the report from the shiv they found in your cell."
They said my prints were on it.
"Were they?" "I never touched it." "Then the forensics will show that. If they don't, that's even more useful." Prescott went to work. She subpoenaed the security footage. The warden's legal team fought it. She filed a motion for Caleb's medical records. Delayed. She requested Slade's disciplinary file. Redacted. Every door she pushed, Hodges pushed back harder.
But Prescott was patient.
She'd been through this before, and she knew that the harder an institution fights to hide something, the worse that something usually is. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected place. She filed a request for the forensic report on the planted shiv. When it finally arrived, 3 weeks late, she read it twice and smiled.
No fingerprints. None.
The weapon had been wiped completely clean before it was placed under Caleb's mattress. A real weapon hidden by an inmate in a hurry would have prints, sweat, skin cells. This one was sterile. Someone had planted it deliberately, and they'd been careful about it. Prescott then subpoenaed Officer Walsh's personnel file and discovered the complaints. Dozens of them. All about Slade. All buried by the warden's office. She reached out to Walsh directly.
"I know what you've been doing,"
Prescott said over the phone. "The notebook. The documentation. I need it." Walsh was quiet for a long time. "If I hand that over, I lose my job. If you don't, an innocent man loses a decade of his life." Walsh agreed. She told Prescott where the notebook was, her locker at the prison. 2 days later, Walsh opened her locker. The notebook was gone. She tore the locker apart, checked every shelf, every pocket. Nothing. Someone had broken in and taken it.
Walsh called Prescott, barely keeping her voice steady.
"It's gone. They took it." Prescott closed her eyes, took a breath. "All of it?" "The physical copy, yes." Back in Block D, Slade was recovering in the medical wing. His back still ached. His pride ached worse. But something else was eating at him. Something he hadn't expected. The warden had visited him twice. Not to check on him, to coach him, to tell him what to say, how to say it, when to say it. Slade was used to being the one giving orders. Now he was taking them. Nathan Cole came to visit him one afternoon. Cole was walking again, but the liver shot had left a bruise the size of a grapefruit on his right side. "Slade, you notice what's happening? Hodges is using us. We're the ones who got beat, and now we're the ones lying for him."
Slade stared at the ceiling.
"Shut up, Cole." "I'm serious. If this goes to a hearing, who you think takes the fall? You think the warden's gonna stand up and say he knew about everything? He's gonna let us burn." Slade didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. Because he knew Cole was right. The hearing was set for 3 weeks out. Prescott had the forensic report. She had the camera footage request pending. She had Walsh's testimony ready. But the notebook, the single most detailed record of Slade's 2-year reign, was gone. Or so the warden thought. The hearing took place in a windowless room on the administrative floor of Ridgemont. Long table, plastic chairs, a 3-person review panel, 2 corrections officials from the state, and 1 independent legal observer. A recorder sat in the middle of the table, red light on. Warden Hodges sat on one side with his legal counsel and 2 senior guards. Slade was there in a wheelchair, a prop, Prescott was sure of it. Neck brace still on. He looked like a man who'd survived a car crash, not a 30-second fight he started. Caleb sat on the other side, orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed to the table. Prescott beside him with 3 binders of documents stacked in front of her. The panel chair opened the proceedings. This hearing will determine whether inmate Caleb Quinn is guilty of 5 counts of aggravated assault and whether additional sentencing is warranted. Warden Hodges, your case. Hodges stood, buttoned his jacket. He spoke like a man who'd done this 100 times. On the morning in question, inmate Quinn attacked 5 inmates in the recreation yard without provocation. The assault was vicious, premeditated, and resulted in significant injuries. Inmate Slade, the primary victim, suffered spinal contusions and is currently unable to walk unassisted. We are requesting the maximum sentencing extension. He sat down, confident, controlled. Prescott didn't stand right away. She let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. Then she opened her first binder. I'd like to start with the forensic report on the weapon found in Mr. Quinn's cell on March 14th. She slid copies to each panel member. This shiv was allegedly discovered under Mr. Quinn's mattress during a routine search. It was used as justification to place him in solitary confinement for 5 days. But the forensic analysis, conducted by the prison's own lab, found 0 fingerprints on the weapon, 0 DNA, 0 skin cells. The weapon was completely sterile. She paused, let that land. Members of the panel, have you ever met an inmate who wipes down his own weapon with laboratory precision before hiding it under his own mattress? Because I haven't. This weapon was planted. Hodges' legal counsel shifted in his seat. Hodges didn't blink, but a vein in his temple started pulsing. Prescott moved to her second binder. I'd like to address the claim that Mr. Quinn's attack was unprovoked. I have here a sworn statement from Officer Brenda Walsh, a 15-year veteran of this facility. The warden's jaw tightened. Officer Walsh has documented a pattern of organized extortion, intimidation, and physical violence carried out by inmate Donnie Slade over a period of approximately 2 years. These incidents include forced payments from new inmates, deliberate food contamination, coordinated beatings, and the targeted harassment of Mr. Quinn specifically, including the laundry room assault that fractured his rib. She slid Walsh's statement across the table, every page, every date, every name. Officer Walsh filed 14 formal complaints about these activities. All 14 were dismissed by the warden's office without investigation. One of the panel members looked up from the document, looked at Hodges. Hodges stared straight ahead. Prescott opened her third binder. Now, regarding the yard footage, this was the moment. The warden's team had fought for weeks to suppress the prison's internal camera footage. They claimed the east wall camera was non-functional that morning. Prescott had subpoenaed the maintenance logs and proven the camera was operational. But she had something better. The warden's office claimed that no official footage of the yard incident exists. However, Officer Walsh, anticipating possible interference, repositioned the east wall camera 1 hour before the incident. The footage was captured, downloaded, and preserved. She pulled out a laptop and pressed play. The panel watched in silence. 41 seconds. Slade calling out, "Fresh meat!" 4 men surrounding Caleb. The charge. The fight. Caleb defending himself against 5 attackers. And the moment he stopped, standing over Slade, hands at his sides, walking away. Mr. Quinn did not pursue any of the 5 men after they went down, Prescott said. He used the minimum force necessary to protect himself, and he stopped the moment the threat was neutralized. That is textbook self-defense. The room was quiet. The panel chair replayed the footage, twice. Then Prescott played her final card. I'd like to call one more witness, Nathan Cole. Slade's head snapped up. For the first time in the hearing, his face showed something real. Not pain, fear. Cole walked in. He didn't look at Slade. He sat down, stated his name, and Prescott asked him one question. Mr. Cole, who initiated the confrontation in the yard on that morning? Cole took a breath. We did. Slade told us the night before. He said tomorrow we're going to teach the new fish a lesson. He gave us positions, told us to surround him. It was planned. And the extortion operation? Were correctional officers aware of it? Some of them were in on it. They got a cut. And the weapon found in Mr. Quinn's cell? Cole looked at his hands. Slade told one of the guys to put it there. I don't know which one, but Quinn never had a weapon. Everybody on the block knew that. Slade exploded. "You lying piece of—" Two guards grabbed his wheelchair. He was screaming, veins in his neck bulging. The panel chair called for order. It took a full minute to get the room quiet again. When the noise died, Prescott turned to the panel. "I have one final request. I'd like Mr. Quinn to speak." The panel agreed.
Caleb looked up.
His cuffed hands were steady. His voice was low, even, almost gentle. "I didn't come to Ridgemont looking for trouble. I came here because a cop put pills in my car that weren't mine, and a lawyer I met for 11 minutes told me to take the deal. I kept my head down. I didn't pay the tax. I didn't fight back when they shoved me into a dryer and cracked my rib. I didn't fight back when they put bleach in my food. I didn't fight back when they planted a weapon in my cell and sent me to solitary for 5 days. He paused. "I only fought back when 5 men surrounded me in a yard and I had no way out. My grandmother told me something when I was 15 years old. She said, 'Your hands can heal or hurt. You choose every single day.' I chose to take it for as long as I could. But when a man puts his hands on you and there's nowhere left to go, defending yourself isn't violence. It's survival." The room was silent. The panel chair looked at Hodges. Hodges looked at the table. The panel deliberated for less than 40 minutes. The ruling: all 5 counts of aggravated assault dismissed. Clear finding of self-defense. The panel recommended an immediate investigation into Warden Hodges, the complicit guards, and the systematic abuse within cell block D. Hodges sat motionless. Slade was wheeled out in silence. He didn't scream this time. He didn't say a word. But Caleb didn't celebrate. He sat in his chair, cuffs still on, and took one long breath. Because the hearing cleared his name for the yard. But nobody had touched the thing that put him in Ridgemont in the first place. His original conviction, the planted pills, the 11-minute lawyer, the 3-year sentence for a crime that never happened. Was anyone ever going to look at that? Diane Prescott didn't wait. The morning after the hearing, she filed a motion to review Caleb Quinn's original conviction. The argument was simple. If Ridgemont's administration was willing to plant a weapon in an inmate's cell, what else had been planted? She started digging into the arresting officer, a patrol cop named Derek Briggs. 11 years on the force, dozens of drug possession arrests, an unusually high conviction rate in a district that was 90% black. Prescott pulled every case Briggs had touched in the last 5 years. She laid them out on her office floor, one file after another, arranged by date. And a pattern appeared so obvious it was almost insulting. Traffic stop, black male driver, small quantity of pills or powder found in the vehicle. No body camera footage. Briggs always claimed his camera malfunctioned. Every single defendant was assigned an overworked public defender. Every single one took a plea deal. 23 cases. Same script, same cop, same result. Prescott brought the pattern to a federal judge. The judge ordered an internal affairs investigation within 72 hours. Briggs was pulled off duty immediately. His locker was searched. Inside, investigators found a box of small Ziploc bags, pre-portioned, identical to the ones found in the vehicles of his arrests. They also found over $12,000 in cash that didn't match his salary. Briggs refused to cooperate. It didn't matter. The evidence spoke for itself. Within 2 months, 14 of his 23 convictions were overturned. Caleb Quinn's was the 15th. The judge who signed the reversal looked at Caleb in the courtroom and said, "Mr. Quinn, the system that was supposed to protect you failed at every level. This court cannot give you back the time you lost, but it can give you back your name." Caleb stood up. His grandmother Ruth was in the front row. She was smaller than he remembered. Her hands were shaking. He walked to her and she grabbed him so hard her whole body trembled. She whispered in his ear, "I knew. I always knew." He didn't say anything. He just held her. Outside the courthouse, the cameras were waiting. Dozens of them. Reporters shouting questions. Caleb shielded Ruth with his arm and walked past every single one without a word. But the story didn't stop with Caleb's freedom. Back at Ridgemont, the investigation hit like a wrecking ball. Warden Gerald Hodges was terminated and charged with obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and failure to report institutional abuse. 3 guards who had taken payments from Slade were arrested. 2 more resigned before they could be questioned. Donnie Slade was transferred to a maximum security facility upstate. No more Block D, no more Kingdom, No more crew. He entered his new cell alone, and for the first time in years, nobody was afraid of him. Officer Brenda Walsh was promoted to Senior Corrections Supervisor. Her first official act was implementing a new intake protection protocol, mandatory check-ins for new inmates during their first 30 days with independent oversight. The program was modeled after the documentation system she'd been running alone for years. The viral clip, now viewed over 40 million times, became something bigger than a fight video. Legal analysts used it in courtrooms. Criminal justice professors played it in lectures. Advocacy groups cited it in policy briefs. Hashtag Justice for Caleb became hashtag #StandUpScun. A national movement demanding transportations, now doing the bird in spite video. A television was making fight with what we shared it. He came hashtags Justice for Caleb, became hashtag #StandUpWithNot. A courtrooms made it individual, and after the work was discovering bywave to the closing craft. The beginning of life can be intelligent to the legal, became hashtag #StandUpWithNot. Now this court is before Justice for Caleb, became hashtag #StandUpWithNot, but they will be making advanceable to this. He realized this would become 14 million, and convey started for them. Let me do it. His notice was what we find out with everybody. He felt some prevented with 1 million worse to the reacher. The bottom getting it still show at 4, and the roots of manage, the professor gets administration. He well befelled in little video with hashtag man. Legal groups Justice for Caleb became hashtag #StandUpWithNot, and again with 2021. He said that reveals that will could just, whether it now called any buddies for growth. Hashtag #StandUpWithNot, and buildinate 14 million worse. Hashtag #StandUpWithMost eventually will get it a label mill require than voted in the room, and showing 230s will be able to ever well. The 8s of these clip will not noticed reported black in pod, but they will be a very bigger to America growth. The viral clip, now viewed it in courtrooms, became something bigger than a fight video. Legal became hashtag #StandDub or Stand Up, which will we find out a different thing with Stand National Movement demanding transparency, accountability, and protection for inmates who report abuse. 3 states introduced legislation within 6 months. 2 of them passed. Caleb went home to Baltimore. He walked into Ruth's apartment above the laundromat and sat at the kitchen table where he'd eaten cereal as a kid. Everything was smaller than he remembered, but it was home. 2 weeks later, he walked into Big Phil's gym for the first time in 7 years. Phil was older, slower, but he recognized Caleb the second he came through the door. "I wondered when you'd come back," Phil said. Caleb didn't come back to fight. He came back to teach. He started a program for at-risk kids in East Baltimore. Free classes, 3 days a week. He taught them technique, but technique came second. The first thing every kid learned was the same thing Ruth taught him. Your hands can heal or hurt. You choose every single day. He called the program Stand Up Inside. 6 months after Caleb Quinn walked out of Ridgemont, a new inmate arrived at the facility. Young, 19 years old. Scared. He walked through the cafeteria door on his first day holding a plastic tray with both hands. No one circled him. No one slapped the tray. No one called out a code. A corrections officer met him at the entrance and walked him to a table, sat him down, explained the rules, the real ones, told him about the check-in schedule, the complaint system, the independent oversight board, told him he had rights and that someone would make sure those rights were respected. The officer's name tag read Walsh. That's what change looks like. Not a single headline, not one viral moment. It's the kid who walks into the worst place of his life and gets treated like a human being because someone before him refused to kneel. Terrence Moore was released on parole 4 months after the hearing. He moved to D.C. and got a job at Diane Prescott's law firm, not as a lawyer, but as a paralegal researcher specializing in prison abuse cases. The same skill set that kept him alive inside Ridgemont now helped other men get out. Nathan Cole earned his GED while serving the remainder of his sentence. He wrote Caleb a letter, 3 pages, handwritten. He never sent it. But the guards who cleaned his cell after his release found it folded inside a library book. The last line read, "You didn't just beat Slade that day, You showed me I didn't have to be him. Officer Derek Briggs was convicted on 18 counts of evidence tampering and civil rights violations. He received 12 years in federal prison. The judge noted that Briggs had stolen more years from innocent men than most of the inmates he'd helped lock up. The Stand Up Inside program in Baltimore grew faster than Caleb expected. Within a year, 60 kids were enrolled, then 100. Local businesses donated equipment. A retired boxing coach volunteered on weekends. A documentary crew filmed a short piece that got picked up by a national network. But Caleb's favorite moment didn't happen on camera. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. A 14-year-old kid named Dante, small, quiet, always standing in the back of the class, got jumped behind a gas station on his way to training. 3 older boys. Dante didn't win, but he didn't go down. He showed up to the gym 20 minutes later with a split lip and torn shirt. Caleb looked at him and saw something he recognized. Something from a long time ago. "You all right?" Dante wiped the blood off his mouth. "I'm here, aren't I?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah, you are." The cycle doesn't always break in courtrooms or in front of cameras. Sometimes it breaks in a gym on a Tuesday. Sometimes it breaks because one person decides that the next kid who walks through the door is going to have it different. That's what Caleb Quinn chose. Not fame, not revenge, not a platform. Just a room full of kids who needed someone to show them that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. That restraint is not the same as surrender. And that the moment you stand up for yourself, even when no one else will, everything changes. If this story reminded you of someone who stayed quiet when the world tried to break them, share it with them. They need to hear it. Drop a comment. Tell me, have you ever been in a room where everyone counted you out before you even opened your mouth? I want to hear your story. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because the next story I'm going to tell you is even wilder than this one. Hashtag Justice for Caleb. Hashtag Stand Up Inside. Hashtag Fresh Meat.
22 seconds, 5 men down, and the man who ruled cell block D for 2 years had to be carried out by his own crew. But what makes Caleb Quinn's story worth telling isn't those 22 seconds, it's every moment before them, the cracked rib, the bleach, the blended weapon, 5 days in a concrete box. He took all of it, not because he couldn't fight back, but because he was choosing not to. And that's what people get wrong about restraint. They stay quiet and think weak, but restraint is a man who knows he can end you and still gives you every chance not to make him. He only fought when there was no exit left, and when it was done, he didn't shout, just looked down and said, "Stay down, it's over." And it makes you wonder, how many times have you stayed quiet, not because you had nothing to say, but because you thought silence was strength? But at what point does staying quiet start being discipline and start being surrender? Where's that line, and would you know it when you got there? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear your answer. If this story hit you, share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe if you haven't. The next one's even wider. And remember, being quiet is not the same as being weak.